Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to continue our conversation with Josh Thompson, a member of the AUB, or Apostolic United Brethren, also called the All Red Group. We'll talk more about his views on the LDS Church. Are LDS Temples valid? We'll also dive into the purpose of polygamy and the Reed Smoot hearing. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. So, because I wonder, I was talking to somebody and they were asking if there was, and I'm not saying it the same way this person did, but kind of a pecking order. Does the community of Christ think anything about the LDS Church? I'm like, no, they don't care. Whatever. The LDS are just a bunch of apostates. If you're not in the group, they're just a bunch of apostates.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit different, I think, with the AUB, because you kind of, and I joke about the JV team and the varsity, but you do recognize the LDS Church as what? We're not, and I don't know, maybe you would say the LDS Church are a bunch of apostates. How do you feel about that?
I don't like to use the term. I really struggle with anything negative like that because I love people.
Right.
And so it's difficult for me to say that I think people are just wrong about things. So I guess the best way to word it is I believe that the church has just slowly fallen away for a number of reasons from the fullness of the gospel that was intended to be lived. This being the dispensation of, how does the term go? Dispensation of the fullness of times.
Right.
I believe that all the laws are supposed to be brought down for the last time to not be taken back again. And that the church has slowly given up a lot of those. And it's not just pro-marriage, but it's still the LDS. It's still the rightful church as the spiritual entity. So we believe that, and as far as I know, the LDS Church believes that these are kind of the same body, but we separate priesthood, church, and the political kingdom. So 3 entirely different bodies. So we would claim that while we're not the church, we do have priesthood. So while I believe President Nelson may or may not be a prophet, I'm not sure on that one, and that I believe is the rightful president of the church, I don't believe that he's the one man holding the keys of authority of the priesthood here on this earth. And that's, as far as where authority goes, that's the difference. Where we are, while still also being able to believe that the church is the rightful church and that President Nelson holds those keys, because we believe that the offices can be separated, that they're not one and the same.
So Dave Watson has the keys, but Nelson does not.
Keys to the priesthood, yes. In my belief here. That's what I'm saying. That's
why we're here.
Yeah,
we're here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And are those keys mainly for polygamy? Is that what those keys are? Or is there more to it?
I would say you have to have the keys of the priesthood to be able to do polygamy sealings for marriage in time and all eternity and things like that. Yes. That one's a little hard. Polygamy, yes. I'm not so sure what I believe as far as sealings in the LDS Church.
Well, because that brings up temple work.
Yeah.
So I know with Christ Church, the Peterson group, just to go there for a minute, they don't recognize. So this is really funny. I don't mean to talk about them, but they're the closest analogy to you. And from my point of view, I don't know how you feel about them. My point of view, they're just a break off from your church.
They are. That was after Rulin died, if I remember right.
Rulin died in 77.
77, yep. Mm-hmm.
And then in April of 78, Gerald Peterson had a vision where he was ordained to be the new leader.
Yep.
He released, or probably a better term would be excommunicated, President Kimball, and was like, I'm in charge now.
Yeah. Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And so it's funny because it was April of 78, and then in June of 78, of course, President Kimball had received the revelation to allow blacks to hold the priesthood.
Yeah.
which I know is a touchy subject, but kind of my understanding, and I don't know if this is true, but my understanding is, and so correct me if I'm making something wrong here, at least with the Peterson group, and I know you're not a spokesman for them for sure, but it's like, glad we got out of there in time. Now they're letting black people into the temple. They've defiled the temple. And so they do not recognize any temple ordinances after
after that
April.
happened.
I think it's April or June. It could be June, but I think it's April because Gerald Peterson was the new key holder, not President Kimball. And so they don't so they will take temple ordinances up to, I'm pretty sure it's April of 78.
Yeah.
When Gerald became the new key holder and released President Kimball.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
And so anybody, any ordinances, so they will accept the LDS ordinances up till then. After then, they got to do their own.
Yeah.
How is it in the AUB?
I actually don't know the answer to that officially. For myself, I struggle with that idea, as this might be interesting to hear a fundamentalist say this, but I think you'll see this general belief in the AUB, and that is that God is a lot more liberal than we imagine him to be.
That's a quote from Joseph Smith.
I think it is, actually.
It is.
Yeah, but that's just something I grew up hearing, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to think that God is just going to say, no, you didn't do it. You didn't do it officially correct. This doesn't count. I just don't believe God is like that. I do think there's an order to things that has to be done. And if there are things that are out of order, they'll be fixed in the millennium. But for myself, I would really struggle saying, no, those aren't valid because it wasn't done right, or this happened and that happened.
So you would accept LDS ordinances after 78?
For myself, I would say this one's hard. I would accept what the truth is. I just don't know what the truth is. So I feel these are just my feelings as opposed to like hard beliefs, because I believe God is more liberal than we like to think.
So the LDS church would still have authority to do temple ordinances, even say first-time sealings.
I believe that some of them are legit and some are not. There's a lot of the priesthood lines that come through the LDS church we don't believe were correctly done. And this is kind of what I was trying to get at, and I got a little bit sidetracked. As I feel like God would accept it, but that it also has to be done correctly. So I believe like in the millennium, because everything has to be done in order, and because God is loving and understanding, we're like, okay, this was incorrect. It has to be done correctly, so we need to redo this. I think that will be the extent of it. Because I do believe it has to be done correctly.
So I'm trying to remember. This is where I'm really fuzzy, so fill in the details. It seems like, and I want to say Heber J. Grant. How do you feel about him, by the way?
You talked to enough fundamentalists to know that I'm going to say.
My listeners might not know, though.
Okay. So Heber J. Grant is kind of where we end up completely splitting.
Okay.
And I'm actually a little fuzzy on my history here, but if I recall correctly, it's under Heber J. Grant where we really get the team between law enforcement and the LDS Church.
Right, that's correct.
To really start hunting down polygamists.
Yeah. So Grant was, So my understanding, for those of you who may not be as familiar with fundamentalist history and LDS, especially as it relates to LDS, Grant came in about 1933, was issued the third manifesto, said, we mean business. Yep. We're going to start excommunicating people. We're going to root them out. We're going to throw them in jail. I think, wasn't there a raid in the 30s? I can't remember.
I don't remember what year it was. Actually,
I know there was the 51 raid.
Yeah. I think there was in the 30s, actually.
But he would have been out of office by then because he had passed away. But yeah.
So
he was the one that really made a bigger emphasis on word of wisdom, really rooting, like going after the polygamists.
Yep.
Like, we're done with polygamy. We don't want to have them in the LDS church anymore. And I believe current practice, when we ordain people, we ordain them to the priesthood and set them apart to a certain office. And I believe, hopefully you know this better than I do, that under Grant, there was no more need for an ordination. You just set them apart.
Correct.
And so then I think it was under McKay that we started reordaining people to the priesthood. And so that would be a case where the LDS Church was, quote, out of order.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
anybody that comes through those lines, we don't believe that the priesthood has been properly conferred on them, so they don't actually have it.
Because they weren't ordained. Is it just for that time period when it went from ordaining to setting apart, then back to ordaining? Or
I don't know what I believe on that, because there are a lot of other things, and it's not just that. A lot of those things, as far as where the church stands, I've always just trusted God that He'll work it out. I don't have any hard beliefs on it, because I don't want to have any hard beliefs on it. I hope for the best.
Well, because it would disqualify Nelson, wouldn't it? Because
if he comes through one of those lines, I guess it would. Yeah.
We'll have
and
to,
I don't have all the answers for those things. I don't know.
We can't look up his ordination day. Dang
it. But ultimately, though, in spite of it all, I do believe that people in the church are doing the best they can with what they have, and they're honest people that are doing what they believe.
I'm trying to do some math in my head. So if he's 100 years old in 2024, he was born in 1924, 18 years after that would be 1942. So he may have been set apart and not ordained.
Yeah, maybe.
So there's a good chance that, but you're are you going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that he could be in this Heber J. Grant era and have been set apart and not ordained.
As far as I understand it, as possible. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good math in my head there, huh?
Yeah, good job. I couldn't believe that Russell M. Nelson was 100 years old. I actually just learned that fairly recently.
Yeah.
I was blown away. He does not look 100.
Yeah. He's slowing down for sure. All right. So, and I know this is a tough subject, and if you don't want to talk about it, we don't have to, but I feel like I have to ask it.
Sure.
Especially with how the Peterson group feels.
Yeah.
So, because I understand that when the revelation happened in 1978, and it is one of the three pillars of fundamentalism, according to Joe Jessup anyway, that the AUB does not, like if a black person came to you and wanted to join the AUB, you'd say, no, go join the LDS church. That's where you belong. Like,
I would say, based on where we're at in society, I appreciate the question, just by the way. So, but I mean this in love. With the way that society is right now, I feel, and has been my experience with talking with people, that no matter what somebody from the AUB says on that subject, it just comes across as offensive. And so all I feel like I can really say is that I feel okay with saying is that we love Black people. They're not any less valued than anybody else. As far as I know, we've had a couple Black people in our church way back in the day, a long time ago under Rule and Allred. There aren't these feelings that I feel, that I know from experience that the world feels like we have. So I feel like I don't want to get into the whole thing and say why we believe it. If people want to get into that on their own, Google is there. I'm sure it's all there somewhere. But nobody is inherently less valuable than anybody else. And nobody in the AUB feels that way about Black people. And I really wish that people understood that. I understand that they don't, and that there are things that they can't quite wrap their head around. And I get it. I'm not critical of it. I understand it. All I can say is, as far as intent goes and in the heart, there's nothing like that. Well, except for maybe a few crazy people. There's always some crazy people in every religion.
I'm going to quote Joe Jessup on this, and then you can choose whether to respond or not. But one of the things that he said growing up in the AUB was they were taught that Black people should not hold the priesthood, and that as I understand it, that in '78, when the LDS Church allowed Black people in, it defiled the temples. Up to then, the AUB used to be like, hey, go join the LDS Church, go on a mission, go get sealed in the temple. But then when Black people, quote unquote, defiled the temple, then Joe came to join the LDS Church.
Yeah.
And he said his biggest fear was that a black person was going to take him through the veil.
Yeah.
And
I heard that story from Eric Rogers, actually.
it was in my interview
talking
too.
about him. Okay.
And so then he said that it happened when he was in the Orlando temple, that a black person brought him through, and he said it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
But growing up in the AUB, it was so like drilled into them that this wasn't supposed to happen. And so my question is, because it seems like the AUB up until, let's say, 78, recognized LDS temple ordinances, and then after 78, that's when you guys got your own temple, right? There's one in Mexico, and there's an endowment house, as I understand it, in Draper.
Yeah. Yep, there is.
So is that the reason that those were built?
I've never heard of that being the reason, but I'm not going to say it's not. I've never heard of that.
You could neither confirm nor deny.
I can not confirm or deny that one. I'm really not sure. But at some point, had to have happened, because we can't be in the LDS temples, and we want to do work for the dead and things like that. So I'm not sure if that precipitated it or where that was with that. I have no idea. I'm not sure.
Well, and it's been funny talking to Christina Rossetti. She's got a new name now. I can't remember what it is, though. Gagliano or something like that. But she said that this idea where, hey, go join the LDS church, go get your endowment, go get your sealed there to your first wife, and then come to us, that was kind of a 70s and 80s thing. Yeah. And that younger people are like, why do I want to go join the LDS church for? That doesn't even make any sense. Because you've got your own temple for one thing, an endowment house for not, But so that's not. Is it true that that's not encouraged anymore?
Yeah, that's not a thing. And even if it was, there's as far as I know, it would be impossible to do. I don't quite know how the process works, but it seems like if there's a convert, that's one of the questions that they ask you is, do you have any ties with Polygamist, right? That's what I've been told.
In the temple recommend question, well, it's not that explicit. Yeah. Do you support any groups that are not in harmony with the church? I think is how it goes.
Okay.
Polygamy would be one of the things, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And I said, the Boy Scouts. But anyway, we don't have them anymore either.
And just going off of the people in my own family that have joined the church, because a lot of them have, it said that it takes a while. They want to make, they're a lot more careful if they're coming from a polygamous group than from the world.
Okay. Have we hit that question hard enough, I guess? Probably hard.
Yeah, well, on that question, I feel like that's a question we really could go down, but it really is one of those subjects that no matter how it's presented, I feel like nobody could possibly understand where we're coming from with it unless they knew the people and they had the faith that themselves that the people were actually good people. So it's just, in my experience, it just doesn't do any good talking about it whatsoever. All I can say is we're not racist, and we take offense to being called it. And I feel like I can say that for the AUB.
Mm-hmm. So what would you like? Because I would say, well, I've got a broad audience. I would say most of them are either LDS or former LDS, although I do have some Protestants and Jewish people and others, Catholics, whatever, that listen. But what is it that you would like, I'll say, strangers to the AUB to know about your church that doesn't get talked about enough?
Yeah. Well, I definitely can't think of like a specific event or anything like that. But one thing that I really do wish people knew was the purpose of polygamy. That's one thing I think a lot about. People that are even raised in polygamy and end up leaving and turning away from it. There are things, while I understand where they're coming from, I feel like they really missed something. And it's a part of what we do that just doesn't make any sense to Western society, and like evil can't fathom it. It's not fair. It causes emotional turmoil, and I'm not going to diminish the women because of the pain that they go through with pro marriage, but in our current culture with not talking about man props with masculinity in men, and also the fact that you're a man in polygamy, it goes unnoticed the difficulties that men go through as well. But if you actually live it and you let plural marriage do what it's supposed to do, and it tears you up completely, inside out, into a bloody pulp, and then slowly starts to rebuild you into something. And this is why the people in my priesthood quorum I feel like are just insurmountably better than I am. It's this same idea. They live this way of life that's really complicated, and their character development, in my opinion, just far surpasses what anybody can possibly reach in monogamy. Because you're required to put aside your own feelings constantly, and for the sacrificing and the benefit of other people that you love. And I wish that was something that people understood on the outside. I wish it was something that people understood who were raised in it and left, because they leave because they see the hardship of it. And most of my family left for that reason also. And I understand where they're coming from, because they see the difficulty that plural marriage causes. But if you give it enough time and let it do its job, my experience of what I've seen and what I experience myself is it simply makes people that are more like God. I feel like I can say that because we're talking to a Mormon audience. So,
Mostly.
Yeah. More godlike. But I understand where people are coming from that leave. It is really hard. And honestly, most people that live plural marriage end up falling away, or they end up falling apart. It doesn't work for them. And it's understandable because it's really hard. But if you let it do what it's supposed to do, and you stay close to God and you're prayerful, it turns you into somebody. I guess you'd have to really experience it. One thing that comes to mind, just thinking about it, when I walk into our conference room and I look out over our people, I 100% believe and feel that pretty much every person in that room would give their life for me, the amount of love that they have. And a lot of that's been developed because they've had to exercise extreme patience and compassion in plural marriage, because you have to, or it won't work. And that's something that frustrates me, because there's so much anti-polygamy stuff all over the place, and they just don't get it. The people that have left don't get it either. And it's understandable that they don't either. There's good reasons that they've come to the conclusions that they have. And it's frustrating from my position, because I wish people saw it my way, but that's just how human nature is. Well, we come to different conclusions on this exact same experience. So.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk about the relationship between other polygamist groups, the Peterson group, FLDS, Nielsen Naylor is another one. I'm trying to think of Centennial Park. I will say this about Centennial Park really quickly. For those of you who don't know, there is a National Geographic series called Polygamy USA. Have you seen it by chance?
I have not. No.
Oh, it's really interesting. The thing, so I guess there's kind of two questions here. One of the things that really struck me with Centennial Park, for those who don't know, maybe we should give a little background on polygamous history.
Yeah.
For those who haven't watched all my 100 videos on polygamy. So, or maybe I should just have you do it. Tell us, let's go back to, let's say, John Taylor. Can you kind of give a brief history of at least up through 1950, and if you know anything past that?
Yeah. Okay. So I love talking about this stuff. Okay. So this is, so under John Taylor, we start to get the law really coming after the Mormon Church for polygamy. And I'm sure most of your listeners probably already know this basic stuff anyways. But under John Taylor's running from the law at this time, and is going between different safe houses.
Right.
And he's presented with a manifesto to give up plural marriage. for the church to give up plural marriage.
Who gave him this manifesto? Because I've heard vaguely about this, but you're the one who's been most explicit about it.
You know what? I actually have no idea, to be honest. I've never really thought about it. This is my understanding that some people in leadership...
Some people wanted to end polygamy as early as at least 1886.
At least 1886, yeah. I would definitely say years before that. Plural marriage has always been a struggle in the Mormon church. It's not like it was just widely accepted in 1852. Was that it? Brigham Young?
52 is when it was announced by Orson Pratt.
Yeah. Even then, it was a strong minority of people that were polygamist. So there was this push to have a manifesto. And John Taylor, while he is kind of between safe houses, he is at the home. I want to say it's John Woolley's home. I always associate the story with John Woolley, but I don't remember who actually owned the house. But he prayed to Heavenly Father if we should sign the manifesto. And we believe that he received a revelation at that time saying that this is the new and everlasting covenant. How can I revoke a law that's no everlasting covenant? I have not revoked it, but I remember the exact words. You can Google it. So that's kind of where you get the initial stage of a slow separation.
So there was a revelation in 1886.
Yeah, the 1886 revelation, and we call it the 1886 revelation. And
now I know with the Peterson group, they actually have a little printout where they've got about, I want to say 7 or so, I can't remember exactly, where you can put it in your Doctrine and Covenant, in your LDS Doctrine and Covenants.
Yeah.
Little companion. Do you guys have something similar?
No, I don't think there's anything like that. We do have a bookstore. We publish books, but I don't think I've seen anything like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's even got the same font and everything, so it looks just like the LDS Doctrine and Covenants.
Nice. Very cool.
But it's got the 1886 revelation in there.
Yeah. All right. Very cool. Yeah. No, but that would be cool if we did. So John Taylor calls people to, actually, I don't remember exactly how many days passed. I'm not sure on that one. Because at some point in there, he's trying to get the apostleship all back from overseas. Joseph F. Smith was in Hawaii, I believe. No, Japan. He was in Japan.
Okay.
And other apostles were gone. He was trying to get everybody gathered. That didn't happen for one reason or another. And side note, I've heard that's like a big argument that the LDS Church has as to why that revelation can't be legit, because it wasn't voted on, because they couldn't gather all the apostles. Random tangent, gospel tangents.
That's what we do.
So at some point he holds a meeting, which we call the 8-hour meeting.
Right.
John Taylor calls together, I probably won't even remember who it all is. I think George Q. Cannon was one of them. Daniel R. Bateman was one of them.
Lauren Woolley?
Lauren Woolley. I actually don't know if Lauren Woolley, I think John was.
Yeah,
maybe he was. I'm not sure. 2
Joseph F. Smith,
sisters,
I think, was one of them.
Joseph F. Smith actually was not.
He wasn't?
At that meeting.
Because he was in Hawaii or Japan.
I think it was Japan. I want to say Japan, yeah. But no, he was not present at that meeting. There was a couple of girls. I think there were sisters of one of them, but I can't remember who. I want to say there was a Coons that was there, Kunz. Lyman Jessup. I think Lyman Jessup was one also.
Okay.
And you get big Jessup lines.
But the point is, we ordained some people to keep polygamy alive.
Yeah.
If the LDS Church ever got rid of it, which it did 4 years later.
Yeah. So, and I guess the story, I'm going to call it a story on here, but I firmly believe this. But the story goes that John Taylor raised from the ground and said, sign that document. Never, I don't remember the exact words, but he'd rather spend the rest of his life in jail or whatever than sign that document. He wasn't going to do it. So then he set these people aside to keep plural marriage alive, irrespective of what the church decided to do. And over time, that revelation was kind of underground, circulated. I was really excited to see it mentioned in the Saints series that the LDS Church put out. I was very surprised. But it mentions in there that John Taylor's son. Just would not follow the manifesto because he had that revelation from his father. And it mentions that he had a revelation from his father that caused him to continue that way. And
so that's why he was excommunicated in 1906.
Yeah. I don't recall the exact year, but he ends up.
I think it was 1906. Or one guy was excommunicated, one guy was disfellowshipped. And I think it was Taylor, John W. Taylor, that was excommunicated. I think that's right.
I know that John W. Taylor was excommunicated. And I think it was who else is on the council? Anthony W. Ivins.
Matthias Cowley was the other one.
Who?
Matthias Cowley.
Matthias Cowley. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we have this, and the history is so confuzzling, and it should be in our view because everything was really out of order. But under John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff, Lorenzo Snow, and Joseph F. Smith, if you wanted to live polygamy, it was outlawed by the church. This mostly happened after, I want to say under Joseph F. Smith, as far as the actual documents and stories that we have goes. But if you believed in plural marriage, you would go to the prophet of the church and say, I feel like God's calling me to this, and I don't know what to do. It's against the church. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And he would say things along the lines of, well, brother, I can't help you because the church doesn't, we don't do polygamy anymore. And then a couple of days later, somebody would come to the house and say, Joseph F. Smith has sent me. And they would take them to Mexico or Canada.
Because it was okay outside of the United States, right?
Yeah.
The first manifesto was only for the United States. I hope you enjoyed a conversation with Josh Thompson, a member of the AUB, or Apostolic United Brethren. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about garments, temples, missionary work, and consecration.
A woman had a revelation, it's looked at as quite a bit differently.
Okay.
Yeah, yep. But if a guy has a revelation on a woman, he should keep it to himself and not tell anybody, and trust in God that he'll work it out. Like, it never goes good. It does not work to do that. It's a terrible idea, and quite frankly, it's creepy. So.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.